Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We're going to continue our discussion about emission systems today. So last class we talked about how to make things that emit particles. Today we're going to change that discussion a little bit. We're going to deal with the same tabs on our properties or on our button bar. We're still going to use that particle tab, but instead of emitting particles, we're going to learn about hair today. And hair can be used for a couple of different things. Obviously, it can be used to add hair to an object, to something that is hairy. But we can also use hair to simulate things like grass, streamers, anything that is a series of lines is basically what we're going to use hair systems for. So I'm going to go ahead and add a particle system just like we did for particle emissions. And you can see that right here, my little star settings. But instead of using a emitter, I'm going to change the type right here to hair. Now immediately, you will see that this creates a bunch of different strands that equally move out in all directions. Now we're going to slowly transform this to look different based on the different types of settings that we have. These notes are going to be posted online, but you guys may want to take some notes while you watch this because it's really helpful to be able to quickly refer to the different settings. So right now, the way that this hair system is working is it is generating, if we look right here, it's generating 1,000 strands of hair, and it's projecting them in all directions. And it's also generating a hair length of 4. So for example, if I were to change this down to 300, we're going to see a lot fewer hairs. And if I were to change this to, let's say, 1, the hair is a lot shorter. So we can modify the number of hairs and the length of the hair just like we would with the number of particles. Unfortunately, right now it doesn't look like hair, right? It's all kind of sticking up in all directions. The other thing that we need to be careful of, some of you notice this with particle systems, if we make the number of particles really high, then it slows down Blender a lot, and it also slows down our renderings, because Blender has to do a lot more computation and calculation to be able to create those hairs. We're going to talk about some tricks that we can do to keep the calculations low. And the first trick, so that's all we care about in the emissions panel. In the emissions panel, we have 300 hairs and a length of 1. Now, I want to look at the children panel. So children allow us to add extra hair without actually increasing the amount of calculations. So rather than calculating each individual hair strand, this lets Blender add hair for us in between without having to do a lot of extra work. So for example, I'm going to do simple because that's sort of the easiest way. You can see that if I put it on none, it just draws 300 hairs. If I render this guy, those are the hairs in my hair system. If I move to simple, then Blender attempts to put hairs around each of the hairs that I created. So for each of the 300 hairs, Blender is creating and rendering children. So now, if I render, I can see a lot more hair. It's starting to look kind of like one of those scrunchy balls. So there's a couple of settings that we want to look at here. Two of the settings that we really care about are display and render. And these are similar, but they mean different things. Display tells me how many children they're going to show me right now in the 3D view. And usually we want display to be less than render, because if we add a lot, if I bump this up to 100, then it becomes difficult to work with. We see every single child that is going to be rendered, and it's really inconvenient, and it's just going to slow Blender down. Now, render determines how many children are displayed when we actually render the image. So when I run render image, it's displaying 100 hairs for every individual hair that I rendered. So we're looking at about 30,000 hairs total, because I had 300 hairs, and for each of those, I have 100 children. But when I'm working in the 3D view, it's only displaying 10 children. Now, if I wanted to, I could change the random settings to make it look a little bit less uniform. So I can increase randomness, let's say to 1. Now hopefully if I run this guy, the hair's not as even. See how it's shorter in places? There's different things going on. So random means that the children are not all going to be even. Everything's not going to look uniform. So you can modify that setting. The rest of this we don't care about too much. It all has to do with how children are rendered together, and we're not too worried about that right now. Unless we want to go to interpolated. So interpolated is the other form of children, and it's just a different way of calculating how the hairs are placed between parents. Notice here, the hair spread looks a little more even. That's because interpolated children mean that the children are spaced evenly between each of the hairs. So simple is like little clusters of hairs. Interpolated is even spacing. And we have the same display and render settings here. And the rest of these settings are ones that we could play with if we wanted to. And they just are going to change the look of our hair. So for example, if I bump clump all the way up to 1, then that's going to make my hairs join at the tip. It's going to clump them together. So I end up with spiky hair. I can change, let's get this 0. I could change the shape if I wanted to. Just mess around with any different types of settings on our hair. But all this stuff is stuff that really I encourage you guys just to play around with. It's here for experimenting. It's here to see what different looks you can get from the different hairs. So I'm not going to go through every single one of these settings. Some of these settings I've never used before because I don't have any use to. So there's all kinds of different things that you can test out to make your the children of your hair system different. So I'm going to leave interpolated on for now. And we're going to keep moving. So this is great, but if we were dealing with something like a monkey or something with hair that doesn't stick out straight, we want our hair to be affected by gravity. And these are sort of the steps that I want you guys to follow while you are working on your activity in class. So in class, you guys are going to be working on giving hair to Suzanne. And in class, you guys are going to want to use some of these settings in these particular orders to be able to get the hair to look correct. So if we've gotten our hair so that it's the right number of hairs we want, it's the right shape, now we want gravity to actually affect our hair. And we're going to do that, just like with our particles, we're going to do that in the field weights panel. Now, the trick here is to use this checkbox that says use for growing hair. That means that all of the weights that we outline in this section are going to affect our hair. And immediately, we end up with a really weird result. So if I render this guy, I have hair that is being pulled drastically down, way farther down than I want it to be pulled. That's because my gravity is set to 1. Gravity drastically increases the length of our hair. So a gravity of 1 means that our hair is getting pulled way, way, way down. We want to drop this to something really small. I'm going to put it at 0.005. Just the slightest amount of gravity possible. So now if I render it, I can see that it's starting to relax a little bit on the top. If I bump this up another 10 places to 0.05, we can see that it's already starting to become way more out of control. Let's try 0.01. A little bit better. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, that's looking pretty good. This is looking more like our ball might be Cousin It from the Addams Family or something like that. We can see that the hair is following a much more natural pattern. It's being pulled downwards. And this is what we want for things like animal hair and human hair, because gravity affects these things. We are not in a gravity-independent environment. So, this is something that we want to make sure we keep track of. Check use for growing hair and reduce our gravity. Awesome. So we've got this. There's one more trick I want to show you guys. And again, there are many, many settings here. I encourage you to try them out. Okay? A lot of what you do in Blender is all about practice and experimenting and trying things out on your own. So don't limit yourselves just to the settings that I'm showing you here today. Try and branch out. So let's say that we don't want the hair to be evenly distributed. Let's say that we only want our hair to be in certain parts of this ball. For example, let's say we're going to end up making this a face, and we only want our hair on top. How can we make it so that only the top of our sphere is going to have hair? We could partition it and make a separate object that just is the top and grow hair from that, but there's a slightly more flexible way. And that is by using vertex weights and vertex groups. So we looked at emission, we looked at the number and hair length, we looked at children, field weights for gravity. The last category we're going to look at is vertex groups. So what we're going to do is, instead of using this particular field right here, we want to go into edit mode, and we want to go to our object data panel, and we want to add some vertex groups. Now, some of you have already seen vertex groups because you've worked with armatures and we've had to fix our armatures using vertex groups. This is the same idea, but rather than selecting a vertex group and hooking it up to some hair or to an armature, we're going to hook certain vertices up to hair. So I am going to click the plus button. Here's my group, and I'm going to rename this hair, because that's what I'm using it for. And this is all I need to begin with. I'm going to make a vertex group that specifies the vertices that I want to emit hair. And then we are going to start painting the vertex groups that we want. So we're going to go from edit mode, and we are going to go into weight paint mode. Now, some of you guys have used weight paint mode before, but you've used it to try to paint colors, and weight paint doesn't really work that way. Weight paint is basically changing the relationship between vertices. So some vertices are going to have values that are higher than others. What we want to do in weight paint mode, with our weight set to 1, we want to start painting parts of our object. And the areas that are red are going to have the most hair. And anything that's a little bit less, like green or yellowish, is going to have a little less hair. But I'm going to go ahead and paint some hair on here. And what we're eventually going to do is we're going to say, grow the hair based on the weights. So we should only see hair in these areas. Okay, so keep an eye on the red. This is where we're going to end up. Excuse me. This is where we're going to end up allowing our hair to grow. So we've done all that. Now we want to go back to our particle system. And in the vertex groups area, we want to assign our density. What we're basically doing is saying, build the hair based on this vertex group. And we're going to choose the hair vertex group. And now you can see it's only placing hair based on the areas that I painted. So if I render it now, we're going to see that I've only incorporated hair with a little bit of gravity on the top of the sphere. And let's say we want a little bit more fine-tuned control. So what I want to do now, this is the last little trick I want to show you guys. We've done weight painting to control where it's painted. Now I want to go to particle edit, and we are going to modify our hair. So I have a whole bunch of things here: comb, smooth, add, length, puff, cut, and weight. I'm just going to use comb just to show you guys one of the things we can do, but I'm going to do comb. I'm going to take my hair, and I'm just going to kind of comb it back a little bit. I'm going to give this guy comb like that. There we go. That looks pretty good. But I can use comb to manipulate the individual particles so that when I render it, look at that stylish sphere. But it gives me a little bit more free-form control. Unlike some of the vertex manipulation that we've done so far in class, particles allow us this smooth control to modify where the particles are generated and how they are generated. So a brief recap, so you can double check that you've seen everything, and if you don't remember, then feel free to go back in the video or check the PowerPoint online. We talked about how to add hair in object mode. We talked about how to add hair. We talked about the different settings, the emission settings. We talked about how we assign children, how we assign gravity using field weights. That's what makes it all flat like this. We assigned vertex groups so that we could use the painting tool to be able to create hair only where we want it. And finally, we used our particle editing tools to comb the hair and style it a little bit. A lot of really great options there. As I said before, hair can be used for things like grass. So if I wanted to, let's make a plane right here. I could make a plane and add a hair particle system. Let's drop this down to 0.2. And we're going to make this 300 again. I'm going to go to children, and I'm going to create interpolated children. And now if I render, this one's going to take a little while, we can see how we could make a field or some grass using hair as well. So hair is not just meant to be hair in the literal sense. It's any of these fine strand particles that are meant to be evenly distributed or placed over a surface. Hopefully, this will give you guys some creative ideas for your final project, and maybe you'll want to use hair or emission particles in your final animations. Thanks for watching.